Hi, I'm Ashley Cooley, a birth, baby, and sleep specialist and mom of 3. There's so much information out there, right? This show is dedicated to helping you clear out the noise so you can figure out what will work best for your baby and your family. If you're looking to learn more about your baby, gain more confidence in your parenting, and get as much sleep as you can through it all, you've come to the right place. Bringing up baby is about to get a little easier. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm going to keep this intro short and sweet, not because I don't want to spend time with you, but because I'm spending lots of time getting ready for our Pregnancy and Parenting Expo on Sunday, May 25th at the Halifax Forum. Can't wait for that. Super excited. There's lots to do to make it even more awesome, so I'm going to get to that. But I do have an episode for you today. It is once again with the lovely Kelsey Marr. She's been so kind and generous with her time to spend with us and talk about the research, what the research really says behind a lot of topics that we're interested in. And today she's bringing the research too, but she's also going to chat about her own experience going through her first trimester with her pregnancy, her current pregnancy, and talking about the things that, like, what has she been looking into? What are the do's and don'ts that maybe you've heard of, but what's really actually true. So you may find something interesting, even if you have already been through your first trimester, or maybe you will be there again. Maybe you are there again. Maybe you just want a place to listen and be like, oh yeah, I remember that. So here's my chat with Kelsey, and let me know if you have any questions, because we're going to be chatting more with her, and we can chat about whatever it is that's on your mind. So let us know. Kelsey, I'd love to chat about the first trimester of pregnancy. There's so many angles to take with this one, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the researcher, but the first trimester seems to be a pretty important time, but also a time where not a lot of us get a lot of things done. Is maybe one way to put it. Yeah. I remember feeling so tired, drained. At some of my pregnancies, I was incredibly hungry, and others, it was like I just had to have those saltine crackers wherever, like wake up in the morning, put one in my mouth right away, or I'm going to feel nauseous. Like, it's quite a ride, and everybody can have a different experience with that. But I'd love to talk about, like, what should we be doing in the first trimester to, whether that's make us feel good, help us to have a healthy pregnancy, prepare for the rest of pregnancy and or baby. Like, what do we need to focus on in the first trimester, other than trying to get a little bit more rest and get some food if you can.
And I think important context for this episode is, like, I'm currently 20 weeks pregnant, so my first trimester is in the rear view mirror, and also my journey has been a little bit different because I'm doing this my second pregnancy, but my first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage at 5 weeks. So the first pregnancy that we've gotten this far. But I've also been a birth researcher for about 14 years and a doula for about 2 years. So I recognize I stepped into my first trimester with lots of knowledge, some practical experience around babies and pregnancy, if not the first trimester, because often I don't meet my clients during the first trimester. But also, I mean, I will say that despite all of that experience, the first trimester was still overwhelming.
Sure.
It's a big time for people. It's for a lot of us, it's a time where we feel like we have to learn a whole bunch of stuff because we're going through this new experience that we don't necessarily know a whole lot about. Correct
me if I'm wrong, but I would also assume there that the person feeling like they need to do a lot of learning is the person who is pregnant.
Oftentimes.
Right? Because I find that when personal experience as well, but also in our prenatal classes, like when partners come to the class and support people, and oftentimes, and by then typically when they're coming to, I shouldn't say typically because everybody comes at different stages, but usually we're seeing people at the very end of their second trimester, early third trimester. And that is often the first time when partners or support people are like, okay, now I'm going to start learning.
Well, and it's a very different experience for partners and support people, right? Like I know from my own experience with my partner, I mean, he's been living with me for 12 years. He's read many journal articles and theses and stuff that I've written over the last 12 years about birth and childbirth and pregnancy. But he doesn't feel like just now, it feels like really in the last week I've popped and he feels like the pregnancy is
okay, now it's real. I see.
Ish.
Yes. Yeah.
But like certainly during the first trimester, I mean, we would talk about it and he would say like, logically, I know you're pregnant. You feel sick. You're obviously really tired, but like, it doesn't feel real to me in the same way.
Naturally.
So I think one of the like key things that I often don't have the chance to like counsel my clients on, because I tend with doula clients, people either tend to find me like when they're 5 weeks pregnant, they've just kind of found out that they're pregnant and they're a little bit freaking out, or they find me, you know, in the second trimester. They've already gone through that first trimester, those first like 12 to 14 weeks. So they kind of already know this stuff. But things that I would really, that I know I made sure I double checked when I found out that I was pregnant was the safety of any medications that I was taking, what foods and nutritional recommendations. And so in doing that, because I'm the person I am, I read the recommendations from Health Canada, but then I also looked at the research on those recommendations. Is there
any like contraindications?
So well, I've mentioned this before in other episodes that we've done, but public health recommendations are made to a fairly low threshold to protect a lot of people. And so there are recommendations about, you know, how much coffee you can drink. The threshold that Health Canada and a lot of other health agencies point out is actually quite low. You'd have to consume a lot more coffee to actually put your baby at risk. Okay. We also see like a lot of foods like sushi, soft cheese, deli meats. It's recommended that pregnant people don't eat them. And the fear there is salmonella or listeria. But you're not any more likely to contract salmonella or listeria as a pregnant person than a non-pregnant person. Okay. And if you look at recent outbreaks of salmonella and listeria in Canada, you're much more likely to contract them from eating lettuce than you are from eating any of those foods. So, like, yes, it could be very uncomfortable if you get salmonella or listeria, but in the same way, you're like, I wouldn't go eat sushi from a 7-Eleven on my best non-pregnant day.
Right.
I'm probably not going to do that while I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
But if I was to go to a sushi restaurant that I have confidence that I'm not likely to get food poisoning from.
Yeah. Your risks are
the
like
same as
else.
if you're not pregnant.
So because the risks are the same, is it more that, well, you're pregnant and you're already maybe sort of immune compromised, that this could affect you more greatly?
Exactly. But it's like the risk is not that salmonella is going to, or food poisoning is going to directly affect baby negatively. It's if you get really sick, you are baby's environment. Yes. And so, like, if you get a fever, whether you get that from salmonella or you get that because you've contracted the flu, that can put baby at risk.
Yes. With my second pregnancy, I was very sick with fever and, like, all of it for a good week, like, a whole week. And I remember being concerned because, like, I couldn't even drink a mouthful of water without it coming back up. So I remember being like, how am I, like, my poor baby, I was in the second trimester at some point. I'm like, if I'm not taking anything in, and that's what makes me think of those in their first trimester who aren't sick with anything else, but if you're sick enough that you can't eat or barely drink, and how that's affecting you, like, that's worrisome.
So a high percentage of people experience nausea during their first trimester. When we see pregnancy nausea, or what we call morning sickness, it's not any just in the morning, it's any time of day. I know for myself, I felt seasick just basically all the time. And so nausea itself, while super uncomfortable, is not a negative sign when it comes to pregnancy. We do, of course, want to manage it because it feels awful. Yeah. So like you said, having saltines by the bed, basically we see in the research that having an empty stomach is a high kind of indicator for that pregnancy related nausea. So small frequent snacks. I know I was waking up in the middle of the night to go eat like a granola, like a fig bar in the kitchen, and then going back to bed just to make sure that there was something in my stomach. We also, the research on ginger is really good for settling your stomach, and it doesn't seem to matter how you consume it. So some people like ginger ale, like when you were sick as a child. Ginger tea.
Oh, so that's actually a real thing.
It's actually a real thing. Okay. Ginger tea, ginger candies. I know I was just cutting off pieces of ginger and chewing on raw ginger because that desperation. Okay. That's what was working for me. Okay. And then also a vitamin B supplement. So I would talk to your baby doctor before taking a vitamin B supplement, just because you are likely already getting some vitamin B6 specifically. Okay. And you are probably already getting some vitamin B6 in your prenatal. But if you are having issues with nausea, vitamin B6.
You may need a bit more.
You may need a little bit more.
So that's specifically if you're really nauseous. You could need a bit more of that.
You could. Okay. And I mean, the other option then is there are medications that your doctor can put you on. Yeah. Now, this type of morning sickness, if we're seeing, like, it could extend into your second trimester and be perfectly normal. Where we are concerned is, like, if you can't eat anything, if you can't keep anything down, if you can't keep water down, then it might not just be morning sickness or pregnancy nausea. It might be a condition called hyperesthmus gravida, or HG. And in those situations, then we do want to get our doctor or medical provider involved, because of the risk of, like, you're pregnant, you need to be eating and you need to be drinking
let alone
water.
Also your baby.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so in those cases, like, really, if you are not keeping anything down, then we want to talk to a medical professional.
Yeah. So that HG, let's call it, because I'm not going to pronounce that properly. Made popular by the Kate Middleton. Kate and I were pregnant at the same time.
Oh, so fancy.
Yeah, I wish we were friends. No, but I remember being pregnant and hearing about what she was going through with her pregnancy and that sickness. And now, because that was 12-ish, 13-ish years ago, how many more times have I heard about that? And makes me think about all the people prior to that. Like, even now, it almost, and again, you would know more than I do, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like, it feels like, oh, now we know about it, but it's still, I don't want to say like poo-pooed, but it's just like, oh, well, yeah, you're pregnant, sometimes you feel sick. Like, it's not really taken to the level that it is for some people. Yeah. Imagine before Kate Middleton had this issue and was pregnant, and how much worse it was then. Yeah. In just believing somebody when they're telling you they're feeling unwell in pregnancy, but oh, it's normal, it comes with the package. But wow, it can be a lot.
Like, I think there's a couple of different layers there. I think, like, while morning sickness is very common, HG is not. Yeah. So, like, actually having that condition is quite rare. Morning sickness sucks. Yeah. But it's a very different level than what we're talking about when we talk about HG. Yeah. The other thing is, I think there's a spectrum with pregnancy where people, on the one hand, think like, oh, you're pregnant, this is part, like, it's gonna suck, it's par for the course, it's what every pregnant birthing person has to go through.
Everybody asks, how are you
feeling?
feeling?
And then the
like
other end of it is people who are like, well, it's not that bad, you should just suck it. Like, there's no reason for you to be this tired or this sick or whatever, you're just pregnant.
Obviously, people who've never been pregnant.
Yeah.
The end.
So I know for myself, even as a birth researcher, before I was pregnant, when people were like, no, like, you really won't understand until you're pregnant, I always found that so patronizing and so condescending. I was like, I'm sure I can kind of understand. Like, I do a lot of this work.
Like. Yeah.
I'm sure I can understand. And then I got pregnant, and really it was a very different physical experience than anything I had experienced before. Like, weeks 6 to 9 were thankfully Christmas, and I was already planning to be on holidays because I was on a 2 nap a day schedule. Oh. And it was non-negotiable.
Wow.
Like, I had to nap twice a day.
Wow.
And so I do think like part of it is pregnancy sucks. Mm-hmm. Part of it is also just like being prepared to know that, like, when you're pregnant, you are not going to be in your best shape. And so, like, what can you do if you are planning a pregnancy? What can you do to plan for that? Yeah. To know that there's likely to be this window of time. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't planning for pregnancy, still, how can you support yourself when you don't feel well? In all of these different and various, and in my experience, like, weekly changing ways, because it was like every week I had something new. Yeah. That was like my new fun pregnancy symptom from hell. Yeah.
I don't mean to laugh, but yeah, I've been there. I feel you. So in talking about that, probably not, or maybe I'm not going to say probably, I'm going to ask you, is there a way that if you are planning to get pregnant, is there something we can do to prevent this? Or is it everybody's different, every pregnancy is different, it's luck of the draw?
Yeah, it is kind of luck of the draw, and kind of like every pregnancy will be different. So just because you feel nauseous and shitty in one way during pregnancy number 1 doesn't mean number 2 is going to be
and it doesn't mean
way.
Oh, well, I had a boy when I was really nauseous, but now I'm feeling great, so it must be a girl.
Unfortunately, we can't know.
Hard to say there. Yeah. All right, so getting back to first trimester what do's, we talked about the first thing that you did was making sure the medications you were on were safe to take in pregnancy. That the food that you're ingesting is, and looking at the research, it doesn't seem like there's really much of a risk with the sushi and stuff, as long as we're going to
and it's what you feel
restaurant.
It's what you feel comfortable with, right? So if, like, what feels right is following the public health recommendations to a T, absolutely do that. If you are the type of person, like, it's all about what level of risk you're willing to take, right?
Yeah. Looking for the best for your baby? Atlantic Canada's Baby Store is here for you. Nurtured, which is right here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, has the best products for baby. The staff are so incredibly helpful, and they have the most top-rated car seats and strollers you won't find anywhere else. So whether you need expert advice or the perfect baby gear, Nurtured's got you covered. Nurtured, supporting your parenting journey every step of the way.
It's usually a good idea to figure out your birth provider, so your medical provider within your first trimester. We do see within the research that birth outcomes and postpartum outcomes and infant outcomes are a lot better with prenatal care than without prenatal medical care. Although there's, of course, all sorts of different reasons why people take different pathways. And while I was extremely fortunate to be familiar with a lot of the doctors and midwives and providers in my local area, I did look at, one, the difference between, what's the difference having an OB or an obstetrician follow your pregnancy versus a family doctor versus a midwife. And I mean, I used my inside scoop, meaning I had met these people before, but knowing not only what the difference between providers are, but if there is a way to get some insight into who your provider is and whether their values align with yours before giving birth. So for instance, one of the reasons I chose the provider that I did, the family doctor that I did, I'll say I put myself on the list for the midwives, but if you're unfamiliar, in the Halifax regional municipality, we don't have enough midwives for everybody who wants one. So I have not gotten on with the midwives as far as I know. So I'm being followed by a family doctor. And one of the reasons that I chose this particular family doctor is because I know they're supportive of water births and I may want to have a water birth. Whereas other family doctors won't support a water birth for a variety of reasons. So like making sure that the provider that you're working with is supportive of the plan that you want to have in terms of your birth can be something that we can handle or look into or start the process of looking into during the first trimester.
I literally don't think I knew that I had the choice of who my provider could be. I mean, I knew that there was a midwifery program, and that was hard to get, etc. But when I went to my family doctor to say I'm pregnant, she followed me until around 20 weeks or so, and then and told me that like she wouldn't be there for delivery or things, but that I would be referred to an OB within their practice. There's a few OB. So I think I was given the choice of one of three just within that practice. And I'm literally going by like, well, who's got the next appointment? Like, I don't know who any of you are. So I've thought it was just, oh, and this is my doctor. And I'm like, do we jive? I don't know. She did grow on me, and she ended up being there for all of my children's births, and it was lovely, and hands down recommend her. But I remember being at first, I'm like, is this what we're getting? Like, what?
Yeah.
I just had no idea.
And so it might have been different 12 years ago.
Way back then.
And because our medical system here has changed
it changes
so much.
Yeah.
Especially right now, like such a high percentage of Nova Scotians, and particularly in the HRM, don't have a family doctor. So we have different options based on our situation. So you can always self-refer to the midwives if you want to, and I would just Google Halifax midwives. Their page will pop up. It'll give you the process to do it, which is basically sending them an email, and they'll let you know after they meet periodically to figure out their caseload. You have and always have the option of self-referring to a family doctor with obstetrics training. So if either your family doctor doesn't have obstetrics training, or if for some reason, any reason, you don't want your family doctor present at your birth, there is a list of family practices who will follow your pregnancy to delivery, do your 6-week checkup, and then that's the extent of your relationship. So they don't become your family doctor, they don't become baby's doctor, but they're there for with you for that pregnancy journey. Typically you would not refer yourself to an OB. You would get referred to an OB or an obstetrician if there's a reason to be. So an obstetrician is a surgical doctor with specialized training. And so if you are a high risk pregnancy, if you're considered advanced maternal age, if the child was conceived via IVF, there might be reasons for an OB to be involved and to follow that pregnancy instead of having a family doctor do so. Right. And in that case, it would be a discussion with your family doctor. They would refer. Right. But even in that case, if you were to meet with an OB and you're like, you know what, this person isn't who I want, you can indicate that and refer yourself to another obstetrician. And you can make changes in your provider at any time. You could be laboring at the IWK and be like, you know what, this isn't this isn't working, and somebody else will come in and deliver your baby.
Yeah. Oh, good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. All right. So medications, food, supplements. Oh, and provider, of course.
Yep.
Checking that out.
Things that I did during my first trimester that helped me was I pointedly reduced my workload. And I know that's not something everybody has as much control over as I do as a self-employed person. But understanding, again, if you have the opportunity to prepare in some ways for your pregnancy, that you might not be up to full capacity. So I know there were certain projects that I had planned for the last few months that I've put on hold. I'm just not getting to them. I really, I reduced my number of working hours. So instead of expecting myself to start work at 9 o'clock in the morning, I now start work at 10 o'clock in the morning because I knew I needed that extra time. I also created a no list for myself, which is a list of things that I'm pointedly saying no to during my pregnancy, such as taking on extra projects, any sort of, well, I'm just back from a bunch of travel, but any sort of more travel that I hadn't already committed to. And then I also, we've talked about this before, but I took a pointed social media break during my pregnancy to date, to make sure that just I had that extra
mental capacity
and mental space.
Yeah. That's great.
I think good things to look into beyond just your provider are other type of perinatal providers. So mental health therapists, if there's, whether or not you think there's a risk for, if you are somebody who's experienced anxiety or depression in the past, you're more likely to experience that during your pregnancy. So connecting with somebody who specifically has training in perinatal mental health, connecting with doulas or lactation consultants. This all might seem really early in the first trimester, but setting up that idea of these, at least finding out what these people do and how they can support you during pregnancy. A pelvic floor physio is another great person to connect with.
I know I often get emails from people who are just finding out that they're pregnant. Yeah. Or very early, they're in their first trimester and looking at our prenatal schedule. And I usually only have 3 months in advance or maybe 4. So asking about when's the best time to come to class. So I love getting those emails because it just shows that they know sometimes they do love to come early in their pregnancy because that is going to help them plan and prepare. You can come anytime. But even just checking in with somebody and what they're offering and is it going to be XYZ or will you have more classes?
That can be a good way in terms of knowing a provider's schedule, particularly if I wanted to do my prenatal classes specifically with you, knowing if you're going to offer them during the summer when I have time to take them. Yeah. But it can also if all of this is very, very new to you, can give you an idea of the range of possibilities of what a provider talks about. So a pelvic health physio can absolutely help during labor and delivery. They can also help with other elements of your pelvic health, like incontinence, or the fact that for example, I went and saw my pelvic physio yesterday because I'm pregnant and I pee all the time and it's annoying. Yeah. And I want to know if there's anything we can do about the fact that I'm peeing all the time, right? Yeah. So looking into those people particularly, and starting to build connections with them early on, because it's a lot easier to reach out to somebody when you're in crisis. So
when you've already done it.
It's a lot easier to reach out to your lactation consultant when your nipples are bleeding and you've got a lump and your baby's not eating, if you already know who they are, than it is to randomly Google search some person and try to connect with them later.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. This is a really good list though. And not it's a list of to-dos. You have a list of to-don'ts. Yes. That's great. Yeah. But just little things that maybe somebody who has been trying to conceive has already considered their medications, the food that they're taking, the supplements, the what have you. But looking into providers and who else is out there other than my doctor or midwife that can support me, all those kinds of things. Never too early to seek out who those people could be, let alone, you know, reaching out and getting some support.
I found that there were like 2 other topics that I spent, even as somebody with the background and the work history that I have, that I spent considerable time looking into. And part of that is educating my partner, and so like doing the research with him so he's on the same page. But they were spotting and cramping during the first trimester, and prenatal genetic testing. So spotting and cramping is not uncommon during the first trimester, but it can be really scary, right? And so, and the difference between spotting and bleeding, because there is a real difference, and so finding that information for yourself to the degree and level that you feel comfortable navigating what's happening in your own body. I will say, like, cramping in terms of like very similar to, for me it was very similar to menstrual cramping, but that's also fairly common because your uterus is growing and there's a baby in there and stuff is moving around and your organs are moving. And so just kind of like understanding you are going to be hyper aware of what's happening in your body. So what more information can you give yourself? And then like here in Nova Scotia, we have different options for prenatal genetic testing, which are tests that give us more of an understanding of what's going on with baby in terms of particular genetic conditions.
And that's not really recommended for everyone, is it? Or can anyone do it?
Anybody can do it.
Okay.
So you can, it is recommended if the birthing person is over the age of 35. Otherwise, you can do it on your own if you want this information. Your chances of having one of these conditions are lower if you're under the age of 35, or the chances of baby having those conditions. But it checks for, the ones that we use in Nova Scotia, check for 3 different syndromes. So Down syndrome, Patek syndrome, and Edwards. Downs is much more common. People tend to know about it. Patek's and Edwards are much less common. And the reason to do this type of testing is because it gives you information potentially on what's going on with baby and whether or not you want to continue the pregnancy based on what's going on with baby. How
accurate are we
talking? It depends on the test. So the first option that we have in Nova Scotia is called a non-invasive prenatal test. It's a blood test, and it's done not before week 10. So usually week 10, you would go in, you would get your results by 12 weeks. It is highly accurate, like 99.99% accurate. Okay. So your chances of getting a false positive are very low. Your chances of getting a false negative are even lower. And it will give you the information whether or not baby has any of these conditions. It can also tell you baby sex, if that's information that you want to know.
At 10 weeks.
At 10 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's literally, you go in, you give some blood, it's sent away to a private company. And so in Nova Scotia, we are paying for this test privately. It costs $350 to
So this isn't what everyone is getting. It's only if you want
it's an
to?
Option. You don't have to do it.
Okay.
And you never have to do any of this type of genetic testing. The next option that we have is called a maternal serum test. It's also a blood test, but it's done twice. So it's done around, again, week 14, and again in the second trimester before week 20. And it's testing for the same conditions. It is free in Nova Scotia. Now, the accuracy of that test is lower, and you get the results later. So I know for personally, when my partner and I talked about this, we decided to go with the test that we had to pay for out of pocket because I wanted the information sooner. If there was something wrong with baby that I didn't feel I had the capacity to parent, then I wanted to make that decision earlier on in my pregnancy instead of later.
Right.
Now, you can do, and people are typically more familiar with a test called amniocentesis, which is a draw of the amniotic fluid.
Riskier, obviously.
It's riskier because we're actually drawing that fluid out through a needle. But normally that test would be done as confirmation of a maternal serum test.
That came back positive.
That came back positive.
But that is not as accurate as the other one you're talking about.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that's something, like, I know we looked into it early because we wanted to make a decision before week 10 whether or not we were going to do the non-invasive prenatal test. But again, none of these you don't have to do any of this testing. You also don't have to act on any of these tests. The point of them is to give you information.
So what would be the reasons to encourage someone to get these tests? Like a family history of something?
A family history. Generally it's encouraged with advanced maternal age, over 35 because of higher risk. Obviously Downs exists on a spectrum. You can have highly functioning people with Downs, and it can be a lovely thing to have a child with Downs. Both Patek's and Edwards are disorders that baby rarely survives. And so in having that information, one, we're looking at like our capacity to parent. Two, we're looking at what type of experience the child is having once they are earth-side.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, either way, like you said, good things to look into, because if you weren't being recommended this earlier test, but you yourself had, like you did, you had the knowledge to say like, hey, if I want the answer sooner rather than later, I want it to be as accurate as possible, then I'm going to go with this route. But there's a time frame for that.
There is.
So learning about it, at least the pros and cons,
gives you that option. And it gives you the option. You get the information earlier, but you are paying for it out of pocket versus, the other test is accurate. I don't want to say it's less accurate. It's still accurate.
It's still accurate enough. Yeah.
You're just getting the information later, but it's also not costing, at least in Nova Scotia.
But it's all relative to our experiences, our history.
Absolutely.
How we are as people. Just all of that. So good to know option is there. Wow.
Yeah. So I think the first trimester can be super overwhelming, but there's also I found actually I was surprised that I wasn't spending more of my time looking into baby things. Really, what I was doing
taking care of you.
Yeah, sleeping.
Good.
And creating my list of things I won't be doing.
Good.
Now that I'm pregnant.
Well, I mean, I probably don't have to tell you this because you're a birth researcher and doula, but consider this the beginning of, or maybe again you've already been doing this, but to me a lesson in parenting has been put your mask on first before you put on somebody else's, because it's so easy once you have that baby, I'm doing everything for this baby, whatever this baby needs, and you will do that by first taking care of yourself, and then that just automatically happens. So you're doing the right thing, looking after yourself.
Awesome.
Yes. Not that you needed that confirmation from me.
I'll take it.
Never hurts to hear it, I guess. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks.
If you're looking for more information or support along your parenting journey, check out birthbabysleep.ca. That's where you're going to find prenatal classes, postpartum and new baby resources, and sleep support during the childhood years. Lastly, but certainly not least, if you got something out of this episode or our show in general, leaving a rating or a quick review goes a really long way to helping others find us. So please consider leaving one. That's all for now. I'm Ashley Cooley, and we'll see you back here next time.